Olivia Kensington thought she was about to embarrass just another underdressed woman wandering into a luxury boutique she could never afford. But before the afternoon was over, the polished marble floors beneath her designer heels would witness the complete destruction of her reputation. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Rain had just stopped falling over Midtown Manhattan when Vivian Mercer stepped out of a yellow cab and paused beneath the glowing gold letters of Bellerose Couture, one of the most exclusive luxury boutiques on Fifth Avenue. The giant display windows shimmered beneath crystal lighting, showcasing handbags worth more than most Americans earned in several months. Men in tailored cashmere coats and women wrapped in designer scarves moved through the revolving doors, while chauffeurs waited outside beside black SUVs lined along the curb. Vivian adjusted the sleeve of her cream-colored sweater and glanced briefly at her reflection in the glass. At 39, she carried herself with quiet confidence, though nothing about her appearance screamed wealth. Her brown leather tote looked worn from years of use. Her hair rested in a loose, low bun, and her comfortable flats made soft sounds against the wet pavement as she entered the boutique. The scent of expensive perfume and polished wood filled the air instantly. Conversations lowered as several shoppers glanced toward her before quickly looking away. Near the center of the showroom stood Olivia Kensington, the boutique's floor manager, dressed in a perfectly tailored black blazer with diamond earrings catching the chandelier light every time she moved her head. Olivia prided herself on identifying high-value clients within seconds, and the moment her eyes landed on Vivian, her expression shifted almost imperceptibly. It was the subtle tightening around the mouth, the faint narrowing of the eyes, the kind of judgment wealthy people often mastered so well they no longer noticed themselves doing it. Vivian walked calmly toward a glass display featuring a limited edition Italian handbag in deep navy leather. Before she could even reach the counter, a young sales associate hurried forward and quietly locked the display case. The metallic click echoed louder than it should have. Vivian noticed. So did several nearby customers pretending not to stare. Olivia approached slowly, her heels tapping sharply across the marble floor like tiny warning shots. "Can I help you with something?" she asked, her smile polished but cold. Vivian looked at the handbag. "I'd like to see that one, please." Olivia's eyes drifted briefly over Vivian's sweater, her scuffed tote, then back to her face. "That collection is reserved for private clients," she replied smoothly. Nearby shoppers fell quiet enough to listen. Vivian remained calm. "I understand. I'd still like to take a look." Olivia folded her hands in front of her. "Ma'am, appointments are typically required for pieces in this price range." One older customer smirked behind a champagne glass. Another woman whispered something to her husband. Vivian could feel every eye in the boutique pressing against her, weighing her worth based entirely on what she wore. Still, her voice stayed steady. "Are appointments required for everyone?" Olivia smiled wider this time, but there was no warmth in it. "For people unfamiliar with Bellerose standards," she said softly. "Yes." The room went almost silent. And then Olivia added the sentence that would change everything. "We try very hard not to make our real clients uncomfortable." The words settled over the boutique like cold smoke. Several customers exchanged amused looks while others pretended to study displays they had already seen. Vivian Mercer stood perfectly still beside the locked glass case, her expression calm despite the humiliation slowly spreading through the room. The chandelier light reflected softly across the polished marble floors while quiet jazz music played overhead, making the tension somehow feel even sharper. Olivia Kensington crossed one arm over the other and tilted her head slightly, already convinced she had established control of the situation. "I am not trying to make anyone uncomfortable," Vivian said evenly. "I simply asked to see a handbag." Olivia gave a soft laugh that carried just enough volume for nearby customers to hear. "And I simply explained our policy." Vivian glanced toward the young sales associate standing near the counter. The girl could not have been older than 23. Her name tag read Emily. Unlike the others, Emily looked visibly uneasy. Her fingers tightened around the tablet she was holding as her eyes shifted nervously between Vivian and Olivia. Vivian noticed the hesitation immediately. "Is there actually a policy that prevents customers from viewing merchandise?" she asked calmly. Emily opened her mouth slightly as if to answer, but Olivia stepped in before she could speak. "Emily is still in training," Olivia said sharply. "She is not authorized to discuss boutique procedures." The younger employee lowered her eyes instantly. Vivian inhaled slowly. She had spent years inside corporate boardrooms watching executives manipulate conversations exactly this way, cutting off uncertainty before truth could enter the room. Across the showroom, two women dressed in designer coats openly watched now, one whispering behind her hand while the other smirked into a champagne flute. A man near the watches section quietly chuckled. "Every week somebody walks in here thinking they belong," he muttered to his wife. Olivia heard the comment and smiled faintly without acknowledging it directly. "Belarus is a luxury experience," she continued. "Our clients expect privacy, exclusivity, and a certain atmosphere." Vivian looked directly at her. "And what atmosphere is that?" Olivia's diamond earrings flashed beneath the lights as she straightened her posture. "An atmosphere where serious buyers feel comfortable." Emily shifted uncomfortably beside the counter. The boutique had grown quieter with every passing second. Even shoppers on the upper mezzanine had started glancing down over the railing toward the confrontation below. Vivian could feel the weight of public judgment building around her like invisible pressure. Yet her voice never rose. "You seem very certain I cannot afford your products." Olivia's lips tightened. "Ma'am, people who purchase pieces from our heritage collection usually arrange private consultations in advance." "Usually," Vivian repeated softly. "Not always." That single sentence seemed to irritate Olivia more than open anger would have. Her polished smile faded another degree. "Look," she said, lowering her voice slightly while somehow sounding even crueler. "There are department stores 3 blocks south that may be more appropriate for your budget." One customer laughed quietly. Another shook his head in secondhand embarrassment. Emily looked horrified now, but fear kept her silent. Vivian slowly placed her hand on the locked display case. "I came here because I was interested in your craftsmanship," she said. "But I am becoming far more interested in your customer standards." Olivia's jaw tightened instantly. For the first time, a flicker of irritation broke through her controlled facade. "Are you threatening to file a complaint?" she asked. Vivian held her gaze. "I have not decided yet." The room fell still again. Olivia glanced around, suddenly aware of how many people were watching. Pride hardened her expression. She could not back down now. Not in front of wealthy clients. Not in front of her staff. She took one deliberate step closer to Vivian and spoke loudly enough for the entire showroom to hear. "Then perhaps," Olivia said coldly, "you should provide proof that you actually belong in this boutique before wasting any more of our time." The sentence landed like a public slap. A low murmur spread across the boutique as customers shifted closer, pretending to browse while openly listening now. Vivian Mercer stood beneath the chandelier glow with one hand resting lightly against the locked display case. Her calm expression almost unnatural compared to the tension tightening around everyone else. Olivia Kensington had crossed a line, and somewhere deep beneath her polished confidence, she knew it. But arrogance had momentum now. Backing down in front of wealthy clients would feel like weakness. Vivian slowly lowered her hand from the glass. "You want proof that I belong here?" she asked quietly. Olivia gave a small shrug. "This is not a public museum, ma'am. Our private collections are reserved for verified clientele." The word verified hung heavily in the air. Nearby, one of the women holding a champagne flute laughed softly. "Honestly, Olivia is just protecting the store," she said to her companion. "People try this kind of thing all the time." Her friend nodded immediately, especially in Manhattan. Emily looked visibly uncomfortable now. She shifted behind the counter and glanced nervously toward Vivian again. There was something about the woman standing in front of them that did not match the picture Olivia kept trying to paint. It was not the clothes. It was the composure. Most embarrassed customers either exploded with anger or rushed toward the exit. Vivian didn't either. She simply observed the room with steady eyes, as though memorizing every detail. The silence stretched long enough for the boutique's background music to become strangely loud. Then Vivian reached calmly into her leather tote bag. Several customers immediately leaned forward. Olivia's expression sharpened. Vivian removed a slim black card holder and opened it slowly. For a brief second, Emily caught sight of a platinum-colored business card tucked inside. The embossed silver initials on the edge reflected beneath the chandelier light. Emily frowned slightly. The letters felt oddly familiar. Before she could think further, Olivia gave a dry smile. A department store credit card is not necessary. A few customers chuckled. Vivian ignored them completely. Instead of handing over a card, she looked directly at Olivia and asked one simple question. How long have you worked for Belarus? Olivia blinked once, caught off guard. 7 years. Then I assume you understand the difference between luxury and arrogance. The room went still again. One man, near the watch display, slowly lowered his phone, now openly recording. Olivia's cheeks tightened with irritation. I understand customer standards very well. Vivian nodded slightly. No, I do. Not think you do. The words were calm, but they carried enough weight to make several people glance at each other uneasily. Emily felt a chill crawl up her arms. There was no fear in Vivian's voice anymore, only disappointment. Olivia noticed the shift too, and it made her defensive instincts flare harder. You know what? She said suddenly, clapping her hands once with artificial cheerfulness. Let us settle this properly. She turned toward the center of the showroom where more customers had gathered near the staircase. Ladies and gentlemen, Olivia announced loudly. This woman insists she deserves access to our heritage collection despite refusing to provide any purchasing history or appointment confirmation. Several shoppers exchanged amused looks. One older man shook his head impatiently. If she cannot afford it, she should just leave, he muttered. Emily's stomach tightened. This was no longer customer service. This was humiliation. Vivian remained motionless while every eye in the boutique settled onto her. The chandelier crystals shimmered overhead like frozen stars. Outside, the Manhattan traffic rolled past the rain-streaked windows while inside Belarus Couture, the atmosphere had become suffocatingly still. Olivia stepped behind the register with deliberate slowness and reached for the store phone. Then, with a cold smile spreading across her face, she looked directly at Vivian and said, Perhaps security can help determine whether you belong here or not. The final traces of conversation disappeared from the boutique as Olivia Kensington lifted the store phone from its cradle with slow, deliberate confidence. The gesture itself felt theatrical, designed not for necessity, but for spectacle. Around the showroom, customers stopped pretending to browse altogether. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Designer shopping bags rested silently against polished shoes. Everyone wanted to see how far this humiliation would go. Vivian Mercer stood alone beneath the chandelier light, surrounded by luxury worth millions of dollars, yet treated as though she had wandered somewhere forbidden. Olivia pressed a button on the phone while keeping her eyes locked on Vivian. Security to the main floor, she said clearly. We may have an issue with a disruptive visitor. The word visitor carried a sharp edge now, stripping Vivian of even the status of customer. A few people exchanged satisfied smiles. One man near the staircase folded his arms and muttered, Finally. Emily looked pale behind the counter. Ms. Kensington, she said carefully, almost whispering, I really do not think this is necessary. Olivia did not even look at her. Then perhaps you should spend less time questioning management decisions and more time learning how luxury retail actually works. Emily fell silent immediately. The rebuke echoed almost as loudly as the heels clicking across the marble floor moments later when two security guards emerged from the back hallway. Both men wore black suits with discreet earpieces and expressions trained into professional neutrality. Yet even they seemed uncomfortable when they saw Vivian standing calmly without raising her voice or causing any disturbance. Olivia gestured toward Vivian with an impatient flick of her hand. This woman has refused to cooperate with store policy, she announced loudly enough for half the boutique to hear. Please escort her out. The words settled heavily through the air. Vivian slowly turned her gaze toward the security guards. Neither moved immediately. One of them, an older guard with silver at his temples, hesitated for a brief second before speaking. Ma'am, he said quietly, we may need you to step outside. Vivian looked at him gently, almost sympathetically. Do you believe I have done something wrong? The guard opened his mouth, then stopped. Around them, the silence became unbearable. Olivia stepped forward before he could answer. She has disrupted the shopping environment and refused repeated requests to comply. Vivian glanced around the boutique once more. At the customers watching her. At the sales associates pretending not to stare. At Emily, who looked seconds away from saying something she was too afraid to say. Then Vivian looked back at Olivia. Her expression remained composed, but there was sadness in her eyes now. Not humiliation. Disappointment. You know, Vivian said softly. The truly wealthy people I have known throughout my life rarely feel the need to humiliate strangers in public. Nobody moved. Even the jazz music overhead seemed distant now. Olivia's face tightened, but Vivian continued before she could interrupt. Because class is not revealed by who you exclude, she said calmly. It is revealed by who you choose to treat with dignity when nobody thinks it matters. The room went completely silent. One customer slowly lowered her champagne glass. Another looked away in visible discomfort. Emily felt tears sting her eyes unexpectedly. For the first time since Vivian entered Bellerose Couture, several people in the showroom no longer looked at her with superiority. They looked at Olivia. And Olivia felt it instantly. The shift. The judgment turning directions. It only lasted a moment, but it infuriated her. Enough, she snapped sharply. Please remove her from the store. The older security guard exhaled quietly. Ma'am, he said apologetically to Vivian, if you would come with us. Vivian nodded once. No argument. No raised voice. She simply reached down, picked up her worn leather tote, and adjusted the sleeve of her cream sweater with slow, deliberate grace. Then she began walking toward the exit while dozens of eyes followed her across the gleaming marble floor. The sound of her soft footsteps echoed through the silent boutique, like something far heavier than footsteps should have sounded. Just before reaching the glass doors, Vivian stopped briefly beneath the reflection of the chandelier light. She reached calmly into her tote bag once more, glanced down at her phone screen, and quietly whispered for words that nobody around her fully understood yet. Call Nathaniel Graves immediately. The cold Manhattan air wrapped around Vivian Mercer as the glass doors closed quietly behind her. Inside the boutique, the chandelier lights still glittered across polished marble and designer displays. But outside, the city sounded different. Taxi horns echoed through Fifth Avenue. Rainwater rolled slowly along the curb beneath silver reflections from traffic lights. Vivian stood motionless beneath the black awning of Bellerose Couture with her phone resting calmly in one hand and her leather tote hanging from her shoulder. Through the glass, she could still see customers staring at her. Some looked satisfied. Others looked uncomfortable now. Emily appeared briefly near the entrance before hesitating again. Fear kept her rooted inside. Vivian lowered her eyes toward the screen of her phone where Nathaniel Graves' name remained visible. She had not called him yet. Not fully. Only sent 4 words. Call me immediately. For a long moment, she simply stood there listening to the city breathe around her. Then her gaze drifted toward the navy handbag still displayed under the boutique lights behind the glass. A faint sadness touched her expression. That bag had never been about status. It had never been about fashion at all. 3 months earlier, Vivian's younger sister Claire had completed her final chemotherapy treatment in Boston after a brutal 2-year battle with breast cancer. During one difficult night at the hospital, when exhaustion and fear had nearly broken them both, Claire had laughed softly while flipping through a luxury magazine someone left in the waiting room. She pointed at a navy Italian handbag and joked that if she survived all this, she wanted to celebrate by finally buying something completely unnecessary and ridiculously beautiful. Vivian remembered promising her she would. Not because Claire cared about expensive things. Quite the opposite. Claire had spent most of her life teaching 3rd grade at a public elementary school. She drove a 12-year-old Subaru and still used coupons at grocery stores. But surviving had changed her. She told Vivian life was too short to postpone joy forever. Vivian swallowed quietly at the memory. Across the street, headlights reflected against wet pavement, while pedestrians hurried beneath umbrellas without realizing the invisible storm that had just unfolded outside the boutique. The irony was almost painful. Vivian could have purchased the entire inventory inside Bellerose Couture without checking her bank account. Yet none of that mattered to people who only measured worth through appearances. The glass doors opened carefully behind her. Vivian turned slightly as Emily stepped outside, clutching her coat tightly against the cold wind. The young employee looked nervous enough to shake. "Ms. Mercer," she said softly, "I just wanted to say, I am sorry." Vivian studied her for a moment. Emily's eyes were genuine. No arrogance. No performance. Just regret. "You do not owe me an apology," Vivian replied gently. "You were trying to do the right thing." Emily looked down. "I should have said more." Vivian smiled faintly. "Most people are afraid to speak when a crowd chooses cruelty. That does not make you weak. It makes you human." Emily's eyes glistened slightly. "Miss Kensington is going to tell everyone you caused a disturbance." Vivian glanced back toward the boutique windows where Olivia could still be seen speaking confidently to customers near the register. "People eventually reveal themselves," Vivian said quietly. "Sometimes all you have to do is give them enough time." Emily hesitated, then looked carefully at Vivian again. "Those initials on your card holder," she said slowly. "MH. Does that stand for Mercer Holdings?" For the first time all evening, Vivian did not answer immediately. The silence itself became an answer. Emily's face lost color. Before she could speak again, a low mechanical hum rolled through the street. Both women turned instinctively toward the far end of Fifth Avenue where a line of black vehicles appeared beneath the city lights, their polished surfaces gleaming against the rain-dark pavement. One by one, luxury SUVs slowed beside the curb outside Bellerose Couture. Then came the sound that changed the atmosphere completely. The soft electronic chime of the boutique's private executive entrance unlocking from inside. The atmosphere outside Bellerose Couture shifted instantly as the line of black SUVs came to a smooth stop along the curb. Their headlights cut through the rain mist reflecting across Fifth Avenue while pedestrians slowed instinctively, sensing the arrival of someone important even before the doors opened. Inside the boutique, customers near the windows began turning toward the street. Conversations faded one by one. Olivia Kensington noticed the change immediately. She frowned slightly as several shoppers abandoned their champagne and drifted toward the glass for a better view. Emily stood frozen beside Vivian Mercer beneath the awning, her pulse hammering now as realization settled heavily into her chest. The first SUV door opened quietly. Two men in dark overcoats stepped out with the calm efficiency of executive security, scanning the sidewalk without creating a scene. Then the rear passenger door of the second vehicle opened. Nathaniel Graves emerged without hurry, adjusting the cuff of his charcoal coat as rainlight shimmered across the expensive fabric. At 48, Nathaniel carried the kind of authority that did not require introductions. His presence alone changed the energy around him. People moved aside instinctively. The older security guard inside Bellerose recognized him first. His eyes widened slightly before he straightened immediately. Across the showroom floor, Olivia was still speaking to a wealthy couple near the register when she noticed employees suddenly staring toward the executive entrance. The private elevator access beside the showroom had unlocked. A quiet electronic tone echoed through the boutique. Olivia's smile faltered. Bellerose executives only used that entrance during corporate visits or ownership meetings. The marble floor seemed unnaturally loud now as Nathaniel entered through the executive corridor accompanied by two senior operations directors. Customers stepped backward almost automatically. One woman whispered his name under her breath. Another customer looked down at his phone in disbelief after quickly searching his photo online. Nathaniel Graves was not merely wealthy. He was one of the principal investors behind the Bellerose luxury brand itself. Olivia's face lost color as she hurried toward him, suddenly all polished professionalism again. "Mr. Graves," she said nervously, forcing a smile. "We were not informed you would be visiting this evening." Nathaniel barely acknowledged her. His eyes had already found Vivian standing quietly near the entrance beneath the rain-dark awning outside. For a brief second, genuine concern crossed his face. He stepped past Olivia without answering. The boutique had gone completely silent now except for the distant hum of traffic outside. Every employee stood rigid. Every customer watched. Nathaniel stopped directly in front of Vivian. "Vivian," he said quietly, "are you all right?" Olivia blinked hard. Emily lowered her gaze immediately. One of the women holding champagne nearly dropped her glass. Vivian offered a faint, tired smile. "I am fine, Nathaniel." Nathaniel glanced briefly toward the security guards standing awkwardly nearby. "Why were you outside?" he asked calmly. Nobody inside Bellerose Couture breathed normally anymore. Olivia stepped forward quickly before Vivian could answer. Mr. Graves, there appears to have been a misunderstanding regarding store access policies, and Nathaniel raised one hand slightly. The gesture was small, but it stopped her instantly. He turned slowly toward Olivia for the first time. You removed her from this boutique? Olivia swallowed. Sir, she did not identify herself and several customers became uncomfortable. I was simply protecting the Belarus experience. Nathaniel studied her in silence long enough for panic to begin flickering visibly behind her eyes. Then his gaze shifted toward the navy handbag still locked inside the Heritage Collection display. Understanding crossed his face immediately. That bag, he said quietly to Vivian, was for Claire, was it not? Vivian nodded once. The room froze again. Olivia felt the ground disappear beneath her confidence. Nathaniel looked back at her with an expression so calm it became terrifying. Do you have any idea, he asked softly, who you just threw out of this store? The silence inside Belarus Couture became so complete that even the soft rain tapping against the windows sounded loud. Olivia Kensington stood frozen near the center of the showroom, her carefully controlled expression beginning to fracture beneath the weight of every eye now fixed on her. Moments earlier, those same people had watched Vivian Mercer with amusement, suspicion, even contempt. Now the atmosphere had shifted so completely it felt unreal. Nathaniel Graves remained standing beside Vivian near the entrance, his posture calm but unmistakably authoritative. No one moved. No one dared interrupt. Olivia swallowed hard before forcing herself to speak. Mr. Graves, she said carefully, if there has been some misunderstanding, I assure you my intentions were only to protect the standards of Belarus. Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment without emotion. The standards of Belarus, he repeated quietly. Then he glanced slowly around the showroom. Do you know who designed those standards? Olivia hesitated. The question itself sounded dangerous. Nathaniel turned slightly toward the operations directors standing behind him. 5 years ago, he said clearly enough for the entire boutique to hear. Belarus Couture was weeks away from bankruptcy after the Paris expansion failed. Several customers exchanged startled glances. Olivia's face tightened. She had heard rumors about the company's financial collapse years ago, but those discussions were never spoken about publicly. Nathaniel continued calmly. The investment group that saved this brand from disappearing entirely was Mercer Holdings. A visible ripple spread across the room. One woman near the staircase covered her mouth in shock. Emily looked down instantly, overwhelmed now by the realization of what she had witnessed. Nathaniel's voice remained measured. Vivian Mercer not only financed Belarus's survival, she personally insisted every employee keep their job during restructuring. The older security guard blinked in disbelief. Several sales associates looked at each other with growing horror. Nathaniel turned toward Olivia again. Including yours. Olivia's face drained completely of color. The room went still once more. Vivian lowered her eyes briefly, uncomfortable with the attention now flooding toward her from every direction. One of the customers who had mocked her earlier slowly stepped backward, suddenly unable to meet her gaze. Emily finally gathered the courage to step forward. Her voice trembled slightly. It is true, she said quietly. I saw the initials on her card holder earlier. M.H. Mercer Holdings. Olivia looked as though she might collapse beneath the realization. I did not know, she whispered. Nathaniel's expression hardened slightly for the first time. No, he said. You never bothered to know. Vivian gently touched Nathaniel's arm before the humiliation could deepen further. That is enough, she said softly. Nathaniel looked at her in surprise. Even now, after everything that had happened, there was no anger in her voice. Only dignity. Vivian stepped slowly back into the showroom while employees instinctively moved aside for her. The same marble floor that had carried whispers and judgment minutes earlier now felt almost sacred beneath the silence. She looked directly at Olivia, whose hands were trembling visibly now. I did not come here tonight to destroy anyone, Vivian said calmly. I came to buy a gift for my sister. Nobody spoke. Vivian glanced briefly toward the navy handbag inside the locked display. When people survive difficult things, she continued softly, they learn very quickly that kindness matters more than status ever will. Emily wiped tears from her eyes quietly behind the counter. Several customers lowered their heads in visible shame. Then Nathaniel revealed the final truth. Every employee scholarship program in this company, he said, every emergency medical fund, every tuition assistance package Belarus offers its workers was created and privately financed by Vivian Mercer. Audible gasps spread across the showroom. One sales associate covered her mouth. Another looked at Vivian with tears forming instantly. Olivia stared at her as though seeing her for the first time. Not as a customer, not as a wealthy investor, but as someone infinitely larger than the shallow world Olivia had spent years worshipping. And in that moment, the entire boutique no longer saw Vivian Mercer as a woman who did not belong there. They looked at her the way people look at someone whose quiet grace suddenly exposes the poverty inside everyone else. No one inside Belarus Couture spoke for several long seconds after Nathaniel Graves revealed the truth. The silence no longer carried judgment or curiosity. It carried shame. Employees stood motionless behind display counters while customers who once watched Vivian Mercer with quiet amusement now avoided looking directly at her altogether. The atmosphere inside the boutique had transformed completely. The same marble floors that once echoed with arrogance now felt heavy beneath the weight of realization. Olivia Kensington lowered her eyes slowly. For the first time in years, she looked uncertain of who she was without the confident status had always given her. Nathaniel glanced toward the operations directors beside him. Effective immediately, he said calmly. Ms. Kensington will be placed on administrative review pending a full investigation into customer discrimination complaints. Olivia closed her eyes briefly. The words hit harder than public humiliation ever could. There was no yelling, no dramatic firing, only consequences delivered quietly and professionally in front of the very people she had tried so hard to impress. Nathaniel continued evenly. Belarus was built to represent elegance. Somewhere along the way, some people confused elegance with exclusion. Several employees lowered their heads. Vivian stepped forward before the moment could become crueler. Nathaniel, she said softly, do not make this about destroying someone. Olivia looked up in stunned disbelief. Vivian met her eyes calmly. People can change when they are forced to confront who they have become. The room went silent again. Emily stared at Vivian with open admiration now. Even the customers watching from the mezzanine seemed moved by the restraint in her voice. Nathaniel exhaled slowly before nodding once. Very well, he said. Then he turned toward the staff gathered nervously behind the counters. Beginning next month, every Belarus employee nationwide will undergo customer dignity and inclusion training. He paused briefly. And Emily Carter, he added, looking toward the young associate, you showed more integrity tonight than most senior management. Emily's eyes widened in shock. Sir, Nathaniel gave the faintest smile. You are being transferred into our executive client relations program effective immediately. Emily covered her mouth with trembling fingers, unable to speak. Tears filled her eyes as several employees quietly began applauding for the first time all evening. It started softly, then gradually spread through the boutique. Not loud, not performative, genuine. Vivian looked uncomfortable with the attention, but there was warmth in her expression now. One older customer slowly approached her holding the champagne glass she once used while whispering insults. Ms. Mercer, she said quietly, I owe you an apology. Vivian offered a small, graceful nod. Then let us both leave tonight better than we arrived. The woman's eyes filled with embarrassment and gratitude at the same time. Nearby, one of the security guards unlocked the Heritage Collection display case personally and carefully removed the navy Italian handbag Claire had wanted. He carried it toward Vivian almost reverently now. Ma'am, he said softly, on behalf of everyone here, I am sorry. Vivian accepted the bag gently with both hands. For a brief moment, emotion flickered across her face as she imagined her sister finally laughing again after years of hospital rooms and uncertainty. Around her, employees straightened with renewed purpose while customers watched with quiet respect that no longer came from wealth or power. It came from character. Olivia remained standing near the register, isolated not by humiliation anymore, but by reflection. She looked around the showroom she once controlled so confidently and suddenly realized something painful. The people now admired Vivian Mercer not because she was rich enough to own Belarus Couture if she wanted to. They admired her because she never once used power to make someone feel small. Olivia's eyes slowly drifted toward the boutique windows where her own reflection stared back at her beneath the chandelier light. And for the first time in many years, she did not entirely like the person looking back. An hour later, the rain over Manhattan had softened into a quiet silver mist that reflected across the city streets like scattered light. Inside Bellerose Couture, the atmosphere no longer felt tense or divided. Employees moved carefully through the showroom, resetting displays while speaking in lower, gentler voices than before. Something invisible had changed inside the boutique that night, something larger than corporate policy or public embarrassment. People carried themselves differently now. Vivian Mercer stood near the front windows with the navy handbag resting carefully inside its cream-colored box. Nathaniel Graves had stepped away to handle calls from executives already reacting to the evening's events, leaving the boutique unusually calm after the emotional storm that had swept through it. Emily approached slowly, wearing a new expression Vivian recognized immediately. "Hope. Ms. Mercer," she said softly, "I still cannot believe any of this happened." Vivian smiled faintly. "The important part is what happens after." Emily glanced around the showroom. "People are already treating each other differently." Vivian nodded once. "That is how real change begins." Quietly, near the register, Olivia Kensington remained standing alone for several moments before finally gathering the courage to walk forward. Her posture looked different now. Smaller somehow. Not broken, but humbled. The sharp confidence she once wore like armor had disappeared completely. Several employees watched nervously as she stopped a few feet from Vivian. For a moment, Olivia struggled to speak. Then she lowered her eyes. "Ms. Mercer," she said quietly, "there is no excuse for how I treated you tonight." The room gradually fell silent again. Olivia swallowed hard before continuing. "I spent years convincing myself I understood elegance and success. But all I really learned was how to judge people before knowing anything about them." Vivian listened without interruption. Olivia's voice trembled slightly now. "You protected my dignity tonight after I tried to take yours away. I will never forget that." A long silence followed. Then Vivian stepped closer and gently placed one hand over the boxed handbag. "People are not defined by their worst moment," she said softly. "They are defined by what they choose to become after it." Tears gathered in Olivia's eyes, but she nodded gratefully. There was no dramatic forgiveness. No instant redemption. Only truth. And sometimes truth changed people more deeply than punishment ever could. Across the showroom, one of the operations directors approached Emily carrying a folder containing details for her executive training transfer. The young employee looked overwhelmed again as several co-workers quietly congratulated her. For the first time since starting at Bellerose, she no longer looked afraid to speak. Nathaniel eventually returned, holding Vivian's coat. "Your driver is waiting downstairs," he said gently. Vivian thanked him quietly before taking one final look around the boutique. Hours earlier, she had stood in this same room surrounded by whispers, suspicion, and humiliation. Now the same people who once judged her watched with sincere respect. Not because of her wealth, not because of her power, but because she had shown kindness when cruelty would have been easier. As Vivian and Nathaniel walked toward the exit, the older security guard opened the door personally for her. "Good night, Ms. Mercer," he said warmly. Vivian smiled. "Good night." Outside, the city glowed beneath wet streetlights while black umbrellas drifted along the sidewalks like moving shadows. Nathaniel placed the handbag carefully into the waiting SUV before Vivian paused and looked back once toward the Bellerose windows. Through the glass, she saw Olivia standing quietly beside Emily, helping her reorganize the display cases herself instead of ordering others to do it. No cameras, no audience, just humility beginning where arrogance once lived. Vivian smiled softly before stepping into the vehicle. The door closed gently behind her as the city lights reflected across the rain-dark streets of Manhattan. And that night, everyone inside Bellerose Couture remembered that dignity is never measured by clothing, status, or wealth. It is measured by how gently you treat people when you believe they have nothing to offer you.